When I was in grammar school, I loved geography. I loved reading about the tin mines in Bolivia. And I had a globe on my desk, a big globe, and I was always looking around at the rest of the world and being able to place places and cities. So I've always had a wanderlust. I'm the chairman, executive chairman actually, and CEO of a company called Banyan Biomarkers. I have been in the healthcare industry since 1970. After Hopkins, a naval officer for 3.5 years, and then an MBA at Columbia. Joined Pfizer in 1970 and moved overseas by the end of that year to Brussels and spent 11 years overseas, starting out in Brussels and then Seoul, Korea for a couple of years. Must have annoyed somebody because it wasn't a garden spot at that time. And that was 72 to 74. And then the next 4 years in Tokyo and then back to Brussels again. GenProbe is a diagnostics company, molecular diagnostics, really the first molecular diagnostics company. I joined in 1994 when it was part of Chugai as CEO and president and chairman, and retired 15 years later. When I joined, we had about 45 employees, maybe 50, and just about break even, and sales of maybe 50 million. And when I left 15 years later, we had revenues of about 550 million, net income after tax of 100 million. And Chugai paid $105 million for it in 1989 or 1990. And we sold it 20 years later for $3.8 billion. So that was fun to take the company public after we were spun out from Chugai, and to see people grow as the company grew, and to add employees and all the rest of that. And we finished up with over 1,000, maybe 1,200 employees. Fun. I mean, nothing's more satisfying than giving people an opportunity to be heroes. There was a draft notice in 1963 waiting for me. And I said, oh, there's a mistake. And I was undecided between going to the University of Maryland Law School, which I could afford, and Georgetown. If you were a student, you weren't drafted. You got a student deferment. So I said, oh, these guys didn't know I was going to law school. So I went to Washington, to the Selective Service Bureau. So I went over to the guy and said, Sergeant, I said, what do you want? I said, I'm afraid the Army's made a mistake. And he leaned back, took a big puff on his cigar, blew smoke kind of in my direction, said, son, the Army don't make no mistakes. In order to be a composer, a jazz composer, for example, you usually have to learn how to play classical music. You have to be trained in classical art. Same thing. Before you can innovate and be an impressionist, you have to know how to do portraits and landscapes. So I think you have to learn to follow orders before you start giving orders. I've seen a lot of stuff. Probably the most exciting time in the history of medicine is right now. And I think there are a lot of changes that we have to make to medicines, the way we research, the way we develop them. Precision medicine is really important now, and that's why I think it's really interesting. You can take a cancer and you can genotype it. You can find out what type of cancer it is. In the past, in cancer, we would classify the cancer by the organ in which it first appeared. I had some brilliant mentors who took an interest in me, and one was a man named Barry Cohen, who was head of Merck International, and we worked together. He helped bring me into Chugai to run GenProbe, and it's all about people. I used to talk about, when I was in the biotech industry, about the holy trinity of biotechnology. People, technology, and cash. And if you have people and technology, you'll get the cash. If you have people and cash, you'll get the technology. If you have technology and cash, and you don't have any people, you're not going to go anywhere. So people are the most important. I've always preached, hire the best people you can. Not the smartest, but the best people for the position that you want. My father was a small business investor. He had some racehorses, but he told me once, and he was a very private guy, told me once he only ran them in Cuba. They only won in Cuba because he sent them down there, and he had a system of finding a jockey who had the most kids and had won the fewest races. So he would, hire him to ride his horses. The important thing for me, and advice I give to people, go to where you can have an impact. a positive impact. And that's probably the most important criteria I use in deciding which boards to join. The boards have to be in either healthcare or education. They're the two fields I focus on. Both very important, and I have to have some impact. I think it was Gardner Murphy and feeling of self-actualization, almost like the Army motto, be all you can be. You know, God gave us certain abilities that we have to hone, that our parents help us hone and develop, and we have to use those. And I measure that. If it's important, you got to measure it in terms of contributions to society. You know, how do I contribute? You know, how do I make my family, group of friends, neighborhood, community, country a better place? You know, how can I help? And a better place is where people have more freedoms, where they have the freedom to develop in the ways they want in a very positive way. And with my kids, I try to teach them the same thing. You know, I tell my grandchildren, at the age of 5, wow, you're a superstar. You really are something. You are smart, you're athletic, you're going to do great things. You really are. You're going to be a great contributor. I tell my kids that too. And so many people can do so much more than they're doing if you somehow unlock or remove those restrictions. I feel that people have to contribute. You have to leave a positive imprint on the world. I was here. Whether you build buildings or you empower people and those people go on to good things, or you mentor young people, your own children, your nephews, your relatives, or just family and friends of yours, you've got to do something. I mean, we're here for a purpose.